afternoon. I am Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, and I'm really proud to be joined with Councilman Brad Lander, incoming Councilman Lincoln Ressler, who is a longtime friend of this community. This is Councilman Stephen Levin's district. He's represented by one of his staffers who would be here. I want to thank Wyckoff Gardens TA President Valerie Bell, Community Board 6 District Manager. Mike is a longtime voice, an important team here. Gowanus Neighborhood Coalition for Justice, and all the other advocates who have fought on behalf of not only NYCHA in general, but specifically Wyckoff Gardens and Gowanus. And there's one thing I learned about being a Brooklyn Borough President. You have 2.7 million people. You have 20 million different opinions. Yes. And so the goal is
2.8 million
2.8. 2.8. The goal is we can disagree, but we don't have to be disagreeable. We could come to solutions that those solutions should be based on, number one, what the residents want, based on longtime people who have advocated on behalf of those residents. So my son would call it those who have street credibility, that you can walk these halls and knock on doors and they know who you are because you're not a new friend, you're an old friend. And that is why I'm proud to stand next to Brad Lander because I don't know how many times, Brad, you and I have crisscrossed this city and interacted with everyday people, and know what? You don't need a GPS, and they know who you are. And so New York City is always changing, but every once in a while we need a sea change, and that's what I believe we are embracing now. We're putting forth our recommendation for the future of Gowanus that represent a sea change in how this city traditionally approaches development. And since I became the borough president, I've been clear that Brooklyn popularity must translate into prosperity for all Brooklynites. And the most significant part of the census data that many people may have missed is that although we are witnessing an increase in population, we have witnessed a decrease in population among black people. So we can't see the future of this city rise and the decrease of hope decline for black, brown, and poor New Yorkers. No community understands this and needs this more than NYCHA. NYCHA needs to be part of the prosperity of this city and borough. And so as we look to re-envision the future of Gowanus, public housing residents cannot be left behind. That is unacceptable. And for decades, millions of low-income families have left the damage and have been left behind by the damage of federal, state, and city government that has walked away from its commitment to public housing. If you want to stabilize the population of those of color and poorer New Yorkers, you don't have to look far, just go right to NYCHA. They are there, and that is why we are fighting so hard for this important announcement today. You look at the crumbling infrastructure, it's a daily environmental health hazard, and too many of these developments pose additional health and safety threats to residents. People living in NYCHA have been neglected for too long. And when you look at the numbers, they're clear. Just in Wyckoff and Gowanus, NYCHA predicts that they have a $274 million capital need. And those are real dollars, but they're reachable. So today, as part of Borough Hall's recommendation on the city proposed rezoning of Gowanus, we are demanding the city commit upfront to the capital needs for these developments in this area. Give higher priority to NYCHA residents and other low-income community residents in the resulting capital projects. But we want them to put public housing residents front and center in the conversation about the allocation of this funding and this community's future. And the current administration must ensure it is put in place so no matter who is the mayor, they must continue that agenda and make sure we protect these dollars that we are talking about today. And if the city does not, which is very important, and the creativity, and I got to take my hat off to Brad Lander and his creativity in thinking about this. If the city fails to do so, we are recommending that we cap the maximum allowable height in certain areas covered by the rezoning unless the developers for properties in those areas purchase, they must purchase development rights from NYCHA. Very important. Regional Planning Authority stated that NYCHA air rights, not the land, but the air rights that we're not using, is anywhere from $4 to $6 billion. This is a great way to make sure we use the air rights to take care of what's happening on the ground every day. Not only would developers be allowed to build at higher heights if they bought development rights, they would have larger allowable floor area ratios. So this is about securing investment for public housing, period. Invest in public housing. Buildings cannot go up around NYCHA developments while the residents see their futures go down. Not acceptable. We can't allow it to happen. All over the city, we're watching buildings go up around NYCHA, yet you don't see the improvement in NYCHA. We are saying no to that. It's unacceptable, and it is not the future of the city. So we're going to leverage the public and private investments in the area, and we can finally fulfill the city's commitments to our NYCHA residents and ensure they have a real voice. So we also believe residents in this area should be, one, given priority for non-affordable developments in this area, like Gowanus Green, a 100% affordable site at Smith and 5th Street. Overall, Gowanus rezoning will create a more diversity. A recent Columbian University estimates that 20 to 25% of the new lottery apartments under the rezoning will be rented by Black households, and 25 to 37% will be rented by Latino households. That's the mixture we're looking for. We're looking for diversity. And why is that important? Because this community here, currently, one of only 10 districts, this is one of only 10 districts in the city with more than 60% white residents. It's time to diversify this community. And if you were to do an analysis, you'll find the bulk of the residents of color, they're in NYCHA. We want them in the affordable housing outside of NYCHA as well. So our borough needs more affordable housing. Our borough needs to improve NYCHA. This is a win-win relationships, and is one of many of the full list of our 38 recommendations that we have put in our ULERT proposal. And again, we want permanent affordability, a public conference station accessible for users of St. Mary's Park, investment in new school seats, community childcare, street safety, accessible subway, interest on Union Street. And so you can look at the full proposal that we put forward, and it's a model that could be used around the city, particularly in areas where you have NYCHA development. And so I want to just really thank my tenant leaders that are here. I want to thank the partnership with Brad Lander and the incoming councilperson, Lincoln Ressler as well, and just all of these hard-fought residents that held on to this community. When they were waking up to gunshots and not alarm clocks, they did not flee. And so now that we have all of this prosperity, that prosperity must be shared with the longtime residents of this community. I cannot thank you enough. Let's make sure we reinvest in NYCHA. And I want to turn it over to my good friend, Brad Lander.
President, for coming out in this heat and making such a strong commitment. But in some ways, even before that, I want to say thank you. We have the President and the Vice President of the Gowanus Houses Tenant Association right here, and we are grateful to be in your space. We're great, I think it's like an important way to remember we're not only here making a commitment, listening to this commitment to public housing, we're guests, and it's important to remember that. So to President Ed Tyree, and I want to say to Wyckoff Gardens President Val Bell, that your leadership in demanding and standing up in organizing public housing residents and in welcoming us today, we're grateful for it and we see it. It's also wonderful to do this work together with Steve Levin, who's on vacation this week, but has been a very strong partner in the Gowanus rezoning, and Ben Solitaire from his office is here. I want to thank Julia Ehrman from my staff, who is doing tireless work around Gowanus. It is great, as the Borough President said, to be joined by Lincoln Ressler, the Democratic nominee for City Council for this district, the 33rd District. Mike Rasiopo from Community Board 6 is here. I recommend for you, if you haven't read it, the 15-page Gowanus rezoning resolution. The Community Board 6 made a yes with modifications recommendation, but a lot of great details I've made clear. I'm going to use this and the Borough President's recommendation as the marching orders that Steve Levin and I have for what we must achieve when this rezoning gets to the City Council. So thank you to Mike and Community Board 6. And of course, also great to be joined by the Gowanus Neighborhood Coalition for Justice, a large coalition of 30, many different community groups working on affordable housing, on environmental issues, on transportation and infrastructure and education, the issues that matter in communities. But the Borough President is really focusing us here today because from the very beginning of the dialogue around Gowanus, going back at least 8 years of community planning, and in many ways long before that, the community's #1 priority has been addressing issues here at NYCHA's Gowanus Houses and Wyckoff Gardens. It is wonderful to be proposing something that includes 3,000 new units of affordable housing, but we cannot build a mix of new market rate and affordable units while leaving the overwhelming majority of households of color, low-income and working-class residents who live in the neighborhood now in buildings that don't have adequate elevators, that don't have adequate kitchens and bathrooms and plumbing and lighting. And you're gonna hear from Ed as well. So it is really encouraging to hear the BP take the lead in joining the community's demand that the current mayor invest the resources necessary, and also making clear that the next mayor is going to be there to make sure that those resources are spent in a timely way, are spent efficiently, and are spent on the priorities that the residents demand. You heard the Borough President say there's $274 million total that NYCHA has identified. In a recent document that they gave to Councilmember Levin and I, they identified about $132 million worth of things that they believe are urgent, that need to be done now. So we made clear that there must be at least that $132 million, but in some ways just as important, if not more important, is it needs to be done with residents to establish the priority list for how that funding is spent. Look, it's no secret that New Yorkers are skeptical about rezonings, and often with good reason. Too often the rezonings of the past have displaced low-income and working-class tenants because they've been in neighborhoods that were largely low-income communities of color, so the new market rate housing was out of the character of the neighborhood, but also had displacement impacts and didn't even create affordable housing at prices that were affordable for neighborhoods in the area. So that's a history that we're starting from. People are worried that there won't be adequate investments in the infrastructure, that communities aren't really involved, they don't have good oversight, we're not paying attention to the long-term future. But what I'll say here is, based on the extraordinary organizing and community planning work that the folks behind us and hundreds of others have done, we truly believe that if we get it right, and we need to achieve the recommendations the Borough President and the Community Board are making, the Gowanus rezoning could be different. It could genuinely deliver a more inclusive, a more affordable, a more sustainable, and an economically vibrant neighborhood right at the time we need it. That is reflected in the recommendations, and I'm not gonna go through them, line by line, because it's hot out here, but I promise I'm gonna take them as marching orders, and I'll just make an invitation to the press as well, because You know, a few of you have been following Gowanus a long time, but of course, for most people, you don't start really paying attention to a rezoning until its final stages, when it gets to Borough Hall and city planning and the city council, where it'll be coming most likely in October. But there's 8+ years of deep community engagement in trying to make sure that the housing will be truly affordable, 3,000 of the 8,000 units, and at the deep levels of affordability that are really needed. The borough president mentioned the recent racial equity report done by Lance Freeman at Columbia University in partnership with the council. Glad to talk to you about that and why it projects that in this very white and wealthy neighborhood, this rezoning has the potential to achieve fair housing, inclusion, and integration goals that we have long been pushing for. Some of you will have seen the recent letter by the EPA. I'd be glad to talk to you about that as well. We've been doing a lot of work to make sure this rezoning reflects deep climate and sustainability commitments. Every building would have rooftop wind, green, or solar. The Esplanade designed with 2,100 high tide in mind. A serious commitment to the cleanup of public place. And Councilmember Levin and I have been pushing for a lot of things in this letter, like demanding that the city's Department of Environmental Protection provide additional data on the new stormwater rule and make even stronger commitments to make sure both the tanks get built that will guarantee that the Gowanus becomes cleaner and more sustainable. I'm not going to go through in equal detail all we've done to make sure it stays a creative and mixed-use community, but if you want to know about the Gowanus mix, about the mid-block preservation of industrial and commercial space, about commitments for the industrial business zone or powerhouse arts, ask me later. And the same on the creative infrastructure investments, but this rezoning includes new tools for new school seats and new transit investments that have not been done in any prior rezoning. So there's a long history on infrastructure, on community planning, on education and transit, on commercial and industrial and artists and preservation of mixed use, and especially, of course, on sustainability and on affordable housing to get us here. Now what we need to do is take these marching orders from the borough president, these marching orders from the community board, but most especially these marching orders from our neighbors in public housing to make sure that this rezoning achieves what it can by living up to and demanding that City Hall put in the resources for public housing so we have the money to make sure this development and Wyckoff as well are strong places where people could raise families, live in, and contribute to the community that we are building for future generations to come. Thank you again to the borough president. Thank you to Ed and Val and everybody here.
We have a representative from Steve Levin's office. This is his district, Ben.
How you doing?
Hey, man.
Nice to meet you. How you doing? Thank you so much. I'll just be brief. On behalf of Councilmember Steve Levin, we are proud to stand with the BP today, as well as Councilmember Lander, and of course the residents of Gowanus, as we demand that as this rezoning goes through, that the entire neighborhood, our friends and neighbors that have lived here for decades, they need to benefit. They need the capital funding they need. They need to make sure that the canal stays clean and not gets reinfected due to the development. The council member has worked represented this district for the last 11 years, working to help improve the neighborhood. And this last 3 months are going to be one of the biggest opportunities to do that. And he will be here to fight for you and to fight with the other elected officials so that we have a solid framework that will benefit the community and will be able to last for years to make sure that work gets done and that the future council members have an easier time to make sure that that we all benefit. So thank you very much. Thanks to the BP. Thank you. Take care. Thank you, Ed, for being here.
Thank you. We can't talk about NYCHA without having the voices of NYCHA. We're joined here, Gowanus Housing TA President Edward Tyree, and then following Wyckoff Garden TA President Valerie Bell.
Hey, first of all, I want to say thank you for everybody showing up here. I want to thank, starting with the, excuse me, my hands are sweaty now.
It's all good, it's all good.
Starting with the borough president. So I didn't mean to be, out of pocket just now. My hands are sweating out. So, like I said, we appreciate you coming here. We appreciate the fact that somebody's listening. We appreciate also the fact that when the next mayor here, when he gets in office, that he already knows what we want. So when he comes in, we don't have to ask. We know it's going to be acted on. And one of the things we want you to understand is that a lot of the things that he said, actually all the things that he said, was important. But I want to bring something to your attention too. Like last fall, the 417 Baltic, they didn't have gas in that building for about 6 months. 182 Bond Street, A-line, 6 months, no gas. 241 Hoyt Street, 6 months, no gas. Now remember, we just named 3 buildings. There's 20 some odd buildings here. And the probably reason why they didn't have no gas because the gas lines are 20 years, expiration dates are 20 years behind. So that means there's going to be other buildings that's going to go out soon too. So when those buildings go out, what happens to those residents again? That's right. And if they all go at the same time or a bunch at the same time, what happens to these residents here? See, the bottom line is nobody's mentioned housing authority for years. And I'm not talking about borough president now because he's not the mayor yet, but I can't remember a mayor that even mentioned housing authority. You know, and because they don't mention it, we become invisible. Now we're not invisible because people want what we have, so we're no longer invisible now because they want what we have. So we're not just giving that away, we letting everybody know that we fighting for this here. You understand? That's our bottom line. We fighting for this here. And the thing that we need the most is y'all to help us fight because numbers count, okay? Numbers always gonna count, but I'm gonna say this here, it's like, we hoping that when the next mayor get here, I don't know if he's gonna change chair people or whatever, but we want somebody to be responsible from top to bottom, okay, and bottom to top. We don't need somebody to be in office and you just in office. Our problems are our problems because of neglect. And the neglect don't come from us. Neglect comes from the people who work to make things better for us. Because if they were doing their job like they should do their job, you shouldn't be 20 years behind on anything, okay? I called recently for Capital to come down here to get us some more space because our community center is small in comparison to a whole bunch of places. We got places where they got gyms and stuff. We don't have a gym. We haven't had a community center down here in about 20 years. So that meant a couple of generations of our children don't even know how to interact with each other because of that there. And that's not our fault, it's the fault of the people that's supposed to be here for us. And just recently, I got notified to call Capital back down here again because there's violations down here. I can't remember the building. One of the buildings, the chimney's cracking. Another building, one of the walls on the outside is cracking. These things ain't supposed to happen. You're supposed to catch it before it cracks, this way it don't crack. You know, but as long as everybody sit back and they just underestimate us, or we sit back and allow them to get away with what they do to us, they're going to continue doing it to us. When I say us, I'm talking about us. I was born and raised here, okay? My heart is in where I live at, you understand? And I don't turn my back on my people. And anybody that know me know better than that there. So that's how I feel about Gowanus. And I'm hoping that the people in Gowanus learn to feel that way about themselves as well, because we're not less than, we're more than. Okay? That's right. And that's what our biggest problem is, though. People don't look at us the way we're supposed to be. You know, we are somebody, you know? And then we have to start being recognized as somebody. And I'm going to say this real quick because I don't want to take up a whole lot of time because they be burning up out here and whatnot. But my whole thing is this here is like, you know, they offered us, I'll say it this way here. They had a nerve to give us some paper, I think about a couple of weeks ago, about asking us what do we want. You should have been asking us what do we need. Okay? What do we need? I want to be rich, okay? But I need to be rich. I need to be rich, okay? See, so, and the stuff they offered us was nothing, okay? The, the gas lines, they weren't mentioned. The plumbing, they weren't mentioned, okay? They talk about getting us some new windows. I don't need no windows. I'll clean my window if it get dirty, okay? But the bottom line is this here is that we make the choice of how things go for us. If we sit back and we don't say nothing, it's going to continue to say, I don't care how great the mayor is or how great the politicians are. If we sit back and allow it to happen, even they can't help me because they can't help us if we don't let them know we need help. So that's the bottom line. See, so I'm going to close and say I appreciate everybody that came through here, and I didn't mean to talk too much. And well, that too, I can understand what you're saying, what you take too, but you know what though? A lot of times, if you ever notice something, I'm going to say this real quick, too. If you ever notice something, when you go in the restaurant, one of the first things they say is, can I help you? Okay? If you go to the doctor say, what's your problem? Okay? So you have to let people know exactly what it is, because some things that's there are invisible to them and to us, because we don't walk the buildings down and check the lines in the bathroom, not the lines in the bathroom, the pipes in the buildings. We don't go in the basements and check the rooms where what do you call it? The HPTs have to work in. These are the guys that deal with the heat and stuff. We don't work in those places. So those things are invisible to us. So these are the reasons why that we have to make and demand that we get help, and we demand that they listen to us. If we don't demand that they listen to us, they won't listen to us. And thanks again, y'all.
All right. Thank you so much, Ed.
And I am the Vice President of Gowanus Tenant Association. My name is Teresa Davis. I agree with some of the things that he's saying, but we also have other issues facing, like with the boilers. Some days we have hot water, some days we don't have hot water. Lightning, last night, someone got mugged behind 423 Baltic Street. Okay, tenants don't want to come out, they don't want to call the police. We need these issues to be faced now before somebody really gets hurt. Okay, it's a lot of things going on in Gowanus that we're not getting assistance with. And a lot of the tenants need to come out. You need to start coming out, vote, come out, voice your opinion, say how you feel. Don't stay in the house, don't talk to the neighbor. Come out and speak your piece. Come out. It's two leaders down here, Edward Tyree and Teresa Davis.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Okay, so what we're going to do right now is we're going to do on-topic questions on this, and then once we have that fulfilled, if folks want to stay around, they can. We're going to remove the seal, so anyone can ask questions, governmental or not. David?
No, when you look at rezonings around NYCHA locales, we are going to really look into the model that attached to those rezoning is going to also impact NYCHA. That is the model I want to look at. The air rights around NYCHA is part of the ecosystem of NYCHA, and I'm going to factor that in. Yeah.
You're saying, yes, I will support this upzoning of this 82 block area if you do X, Y, Z. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm factoring into my decision if I'm going to support upzoning, if I'm fortunate enough to become the next mayor of the city.
Mr. Adams, I had a question actually Mr. Tyree touched on. He mentioned the chair of NYCHA. Are you going to replace Mr. Russ or keep him on?
Well, you know,
If you're elected.
you can't make celebratory decisions in the 8th inning. I have a 9th inning game I have to win, and then we can revisit that, who I'm going to keep on in all the agencies. Right now, the election is in November, and many people of the press is clear that it's in November, and I would make decisions on who's going to head agencies after November 2nd.
But for instance, you said you liked the person who runs Department of Social Services. Do you like Mr. Russ in a similar vein?
Well, when I said I liked, all of a sudden they said that I was appointed. And so I am not giving you any more likes, so you won't decide who I'm appointed. I believe that we need to have the right leadership, and that's the assessment I'm going to make if I'm fortunate enough to win the election in November.
Mr. Russ done a good job?
Well, you can interpret that. I didn't hire him, the mayor did, and they will make that interpretation. November 2nd, I will have the ability to hire who I believe should be there.
Any other on topic?
Jives well. You know, I noticed that some of you were really offended by that. You know that because you keep asking me about it. Listen, we don't want people in New York that are disrespectful to people who are here. And that is the root of my comment. Those who come to New York, like my family did from Alabama, you're welcome. But you didn't discover New York. This is a city of diverse people. This is a city of people who already have cultures, and you want to be a part of that. And that is part of the housing. As I stated, the largest decrease in populations in this city are black folks. And I don't want to see our city built up and displace black folks who have been here for a long time, making this a great city. And so I welcome people from every part of the globe, but you have to come here and be a part of New York City.
Can I add one thing on this point?
Yes.
Because I actually think yesterday's census news just makes a real clear point that's worth making here, because we saw yesterday in the census substantial population growth in New York City as a whole, including in Brooklyn, and the population grew by about 20% more than the housing stock grew. And if you have people coming more than you have houses to put them in, that's where you get prices driving up way past what people can afford, and you get gentrification and displacement and a situation where there's no affordable housing. So if you build 3,000 new units of affordable housing in a neighborhood where there is almost no affordable housing on the market, you create new opportunities for working class families that, again, the report says will be much more like New York City as a whole than like the community is currently, one of only 10 neighborhoods in the city with more than 60% white population. But then even those 5,000 market rate units are part of providing the units that are necessary for the population growth that we're seeing. I think yesterday's census, for those people that are saying we don't need new housing because we are not seeing population growth, we are seeing it. New York is a place people want to be, and we need to build the affordable housing and the market rate housing if we're going to keep a city that isn't going to be displacing and gentrifying and is a place where people can afford to live. I can do the timeline.
Yes.
So on the timeline, you're hearing the outline of the borough president's recommendation, which I believe they'll have online next week. The City Planning Commission had its public hearing. You can get to the CB6 recommendations. They're outstanding. I have a copy of those. They came last month. City Planning Commission had its hearing 2 weeks ago, and we anticipate their recommendation September 17th. Julia, correct me if I'm wrong. And then we are September 22nd, thank you. We imagine it will, the council hearing will be in the first half of October, and that therefore the council will be able to act in either the second half of October or the first half of November. So yes, during this administration.
I believe that local electeds understand their communities. I'm a big believer that we should listen to those local electeds. The jury is still out if the local elected to city council should have complete veto power over something that will impact a large number of residents. And the jury's still out, and that's part of the conversations I'm going to have with the incoming council members if I'm fortunate enough to be elected to be the next mayor. No. Thank you. I answered that question already, and I'm a trained interrogator. I know how you ask the same questions over and over again. I answered that question already, and November 3rd, I will make the decision on who is going to head NYCHA and how we're going to move NYCHA forward. I believe I effectively answered that question already.
What we said at that presser, and I'll just repeat, and I think we're saying the same thing today, and as the borough president cited, the physical needs assessment NYCHA puts out in its totality identifies $274 million worth of long-term needs. The city came to the residents, and this is what Ed was referring to and I was referring to, and said, here are 3 different funding packages we would offer you. Each one was 40 to 50 million, but the 3 in total were $132 million. So what we're saying is City Hall has acknowledged there's at least $132 million worth of need in these two developments, Gowanus and Wyckoff. So we want at least that much on the table as part of the Gowanus rezoning. The decisions about how that money should be spent needs to be done in partnership with the residents. So if they're prioritizing the gas lines at the top, then that's what needs to be at the top, and that process is underway now. And what's being added today is not only the borough president's strong demand, but some clarity that the next mayor will be an ally in making sure that funding is spent, that it's spent in accordance with resident priorities, and that it's spent in a timely fashion.
Jonathan, you're gonna get the last on topic, and then we're gonna go off just because we have to get to it.
Yes.